Thank you so much, Ron, and thank you all for coming. This has been a wonderful day for me. I'm sure it has been for you if you could stand the Washington heat. I would, I think, most appropriately address the writing and meaning and the goals that I had in writing a novel for the first time in my life. After the first book I wrote, after 43 years of nonfiction, more than 25 books, and after 42 years at Harvard teaching undergraduates in science at evolutionary organismic biology, I decided to venture across the great boundary of the creative arts into the creative arts and write a novel. I think it's a fairly rare thing for a scientist, particularly a lifelong scientist, to make that journey, to take that dare, to undergo that risk, because more than one critic, most of them have been friendly, critic has said, I risked a lot by doing that, and now I want to tell you why I did it. But first, before I do, I'll tell you a broad outline give you a broad outline of that book, Anthill, published March of this year. The story is really basically a coming-of-age story of a young boy in Alabama, South Alabama, and yes, that part is autobiographical. And I should add right now that one of my reasons for writing it was, after being away from Alabama for 60 years, where I grew up, I wanted to go home. I can't pick up and leave Harvard right away. So I take frequent visits there, and I decided to write Anthill. That is one of the motivations for writing it. And I have just finished a history of Mobile in collaboration with one of America's great photographers, Alex Harris. We will bring that out next year, in which I celebrate and also present very frank pictures in the history of Mobile, from DeSoto to the oil spill. So I've enjoyed writing that, and that brought me back home. But one of the main reasons that I undertook to write this book was with Harper Lee in mind. And incidentally, I recently was able to visit Harper in her home in Monroeville. Not Nell Harper Lee. She does not see many visitors. But I managed to get in there, and we had a wonderful talk. I had her in mind. Just 50 years ago, she published To Kill a Mockingbird. And it had an enormous impact, in part because it's an extraordinarily good book, and an extraordinarily good movie was made of it. But also it came at the cusp of the civil rights movement. And it brought in novelistic form to vivid clarity what the difficulties were that faced the South in its deep divisions. Now we are coming out of that, and now we have entered a new crisis of which Southerners are only vaguely aware. And that crisis is the reckless destruction of their environment, many of their expendable and not non-expendable, non-replaceable resources, to be sure, including not least the water, but also the precious natural environments that they have inherited, which include the species for species per square meter, the richest botanical environment and numbers of species of any place on the northern hemisphere. And I'll bet now many of you know what that is. It's the pitcher plant bogs that are sprinkled throughout the South, with as many as 70 species of plants all crowded together in 1 square meter, beating anything in a tropical rainforest. But the South has so much else in it. The great the great longleaf pine savanna that once covered 60% of the South, rich from one end, from the Carolinas to the Texas, in beauty and in variety of species, almost all cut down, with now mostly second growth. So our young man growing up in southern Alabama discovered one of the remaining old growth patches of longleaf pine savanna. And because he's a lonely kid and he loves to roam in the woods, and because he comes in contact quite early with a mentor, a professor in ecology coming up from Florida State who's studying this patch scientifically, he becomes deeply bonded to that land, and then as he matures to the idea of doing something to save this particular tract, and then other parts of the South so rapidly disappearing before a thoughtless onslaught of unplanned development. And so he does. And that's the major part of the book. It unfolds as our young Raphael Semmes Cody, his mother named him after Admiral Raphael Semmes, the great naval hero of the Civil War. She does that partly because she's a social climber, or at least she's trying to get back at the highest levels in Mobile society, which includes the Mobile Semmes family. And she's married below her station as a headstrong young woman, and now she realizes that doesn't belong anymore exactly where she grew up, and she's trying to work her way back in. That's a subplot. But at any rate, young Cody finds the way. He has to deal with the developers in a novel fashion, and in dealing with them, he had to go through law school first, and he finds a solution to blunt the juggernaut of development and combine goals of conservationists and of developers in a way to create a win-win situation, not a complete victory. But he also has to deal with a radical right evangelical cult. And as now we get into the messy part of the brutal part of the novel, and I won't go into that. I'll leave that for those of you interested to find out how it happened and how it's resolved. In the course of this book, he has to study the treasured tract that he has become familiar with in more detail for his college honors work. And then he's introduced to the Anthills. These are one of the many species of ants in this tract that have never been studied, and so he sets out to do it. Ants, I might add, are not just ruddy little specks running around at your feet, but they make up 2/3 of the biomass of all the insects. If you take the insects, all the insects of a region, or a plot, and weigh them, 2/3 of that. In other words, this is an ant's world that we're living in, and it's been an ant's world for 150 million years. They own the earth. Ants are among the little things that rule the world. So, and they also have the most complex social behavior outside of human beings.